Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today on Face Off, we're going to be asking the question of Richard Hurndall versus David Bradley. Which of these actors do you think was better as the first Doctor, going not only by their acting ability, but also by the character itself, how well it's written, and how well it's performed? Looking at the votes, we had 173 votes. And 27%, so a little over a fourth, said Richard Hurndall. A whopping 61% said David Bradley. And 12% said, I don't care for either of them. So they're like, it's Hartnell or nothing, baby! So, easily Bradley won the lead, having well over half the vote and closing in on 2/3 of the vote. David Bradley easily won with a whopping 61%. And now I'm going to tell you why I personally think 61% of you are wrong. Because I think Richard Hurndall is a better first Doctor than David Bradley, going by the 5 Doctors and Twice Upon a Time. The problem, let's see. Where to begin? Let's start with David Bradley. Let's address the sexist stuff now and get it out of the way. Yes, I do feel some of the comments the first Doctor makes don't feel like the first Doctor. And they're there just to say, see how far we've come from the 60s? I don't think it's like some of these people say where they're like, oh, they completely made the first Doctor misogynist or sexist. Or no, that's way too far on the other end of the spectrum. I don't think that. My problem with some of these comments is that there's just too many of them. Like the first couple I didn't mind. I actually find the one when he's talking to Bill in his TARDIS about, well, he certainly misses you. That TARDIS of his could do with a good spring cleaning. I think that's funny. It's the way Bradley delivers the line. It's really humorous to me. And the first time he mentions, you can tell Polly's not around anymore. It's fine. Some of the others, it as it goes on, it gets a little more, yeah, okay, we get it. Now, I have a way of headcanoning this to where it doesn't bother me. Because most of the time when he's making these comments, he's doing it when he's around the World War I Major, the Hamish Lethbridge Stewart, the Brigadier's like grandfather. And so I think he's making these comments to kind of set the World War I officer at ease. I'm just going to call him Mark Gatiss. To set Mark Gatiss at ease. Because that Mark Gatiss is, of course, playing this World War I character who would be of his time and would have those viewpoints. So, and it kind of works. Like when you see the first Doctor make that comment of, well, aren't all women made of glass, really? You see the Mark Gatiss's character start laughing. Good one, sir. Jolly good, yes. And so that's actually working. He's kind of keeping him a little calm, taking his mind off things. So to me, that's what the first Doctor's doing, is he's saying most of that stuff just to kind of put Mark Gatiss's character at ease. Because imagine you were thrust in that situation. Like, if we got thrust in that situation, we at least have science fiction as something to connect to. Oh, this is like Doctor Who. This is like Star Trek. Okay, that's real. You know, we're here in like 1914 when a lot of that science fiction hadn't been invented yet. So he would really be like, what the heck is this place that's bigger on the inside? How do you travel through time? So he would be really mind-boggled. So I feel like the first Doctor is doing all of this to set him at ease. The only comment that really bugs me is the comment later in the episode when he makes the bit about the jolly good smacked bottom to Bill. And I get this is a nod toward Dalek invasion of Earth. I understand that. But there's a big difference between a grandfather, especially back then, saying that to his granddaughter. I mean, it's your granddaughter. You've helped raise her. That makes more sense. This is the first Doctor saying that to a total stranger. So it feels a little out of place. I still think it's funny in a bubble by itself. I still think that scene's kind of funny. And how the first Doctor just ducks right back into the TARDIS. The Doctor's like, can we just never talk about that? That's kind of funny. But it doesn't really make sense, and it doesn't feel in character with the first Doctor. Now, Bradley's performance, to me, especially as I've seen more of Hartnell. And keeping in mind, I like Twice Upon a Time more than some people do. I actually really enjoy Twice Upon a Time. I've talked before about how fond I am of the episode. I think it's a great episode. And it has my favorite regeneration in it, with the original regeneration being done in that one from Hartnell to Troughton. I love that regeneration. But Bradley, as I see more of Hartnell, and I've seen, almost half of Hartnell's stuff now, thanks to a lot of you, by the way. Thank you for all the First Doctor stuff y'all have been sending. Is that Bradley's mannerisms don't feel like Hartnell to me a lot of times. He doesn't feel like Hartnell's First Doctor, which is what he's supposed to be. He feels like, say, a First Doctor from a parallel universe that's close, but not quite there. Slightly different. Kind of like, maybe some of the Doctor Stranges in Doctor Strange 2. Close, but not quite. Slightly different. That's how he feels. He feels like a parallel Earth First Doctor, parallel dimension First Doctor. That's a little different. He doesn't feel like Hartnell's First Doctor, which to me, Richard Hurndall's First Doctor does. It's not perfect, but he feels like the First Doctor. He feels like that Hartnell First Doctor to me. He is in command. That's the big thing. And a lot of this does boil down to the writing. I probably should have opened with this. It's not just the actors, it's the writing. I feel like the First Doctor is written better in the Five Doctors than he is Twice Upon a Time. Because Stephen Moffat is a great Doctor Who writer most of the time, but Terrence Dicks is a great Doctor Who writer pretty much all of the time. And Uncle Terrence, if I remember right, Uncle Terrence did Five Doctors. And it is so good. He understands the First Doctor better, I feel. And he writes the First Doctor properly. Because the First Doctor is the Doctor all of the other Doctors are supposed to be in awe of. We see this in the Five Doctors. We see this in the Three Doctors. In the Three Doctors, the Second and Third Doctors pretty much defer to the First Doctor. And when he tells them things like, that's right, it's a bridge, cross it! They listen to him. And at one point, when it's just the Second Doctor in the TARDIS, and they're like, why are you doing what he said? Why are you doing that? Because he told me to. And I've always had the greatest respect for his advice. They hold the First Doctor in a type of awe. And even in the Five Doctors we see this. When the Fifth Doctor sees the First Doctor and he's on the ground, he's like, it's you. They have a huge respect for the First Doctor, rightfully so. The First Doctor always feels like the leader. Even though he's barely in the Three Doctors, he feels like when they're all three together, he's the one calling the shots. In the Five Doctors, even though the Fifth Doctor is the current Doctor in that story, the First Doctor feels like the leader, the one calling the shots. He always feels in command of the room, which I love. I like when Tegan's like, who might you happen to be? I might happen to be any number of things. Or I might be any number of things. I happen to be the Doctor. The original, you might say. I love the way he delivers that line. Perfectly in command and in control of the situation. And then he asked Tegan to make some tea. So you get that little bit of stuff like Twice Upon a Time, that minor, what some people might call sexism. But it's very subtle. It's the Fifth Doctor's like, oh, you could just humor him, and Tegan will go with you. Or Turlough will go with you. And it only touches on it that one time. It's very subtle. And that's really all you need. That itty bitty little bit just to get it in there. And it's fine. And the First Doctor pretty much takes command of the situation. Now, people are like, well, he gets tired a lot in that story. Well, keep in mind, this is after Susan left. So the First Doctor's really old at this point. He's not far away from his regeneration. Because this is obviously after Dalek Invasion of Earth. So after the first half of Season 2, or the first part of Season 2. So the First Doctor's old. He is probably starting to wear down a bit. I feel like neither of them, of course, are perfect. I love the First Doctor with a lot of his men. Oh, my dear boy. His little laugh that neither of them quite do. I do like Hurndall's laugh at the end after they trick Barusa. He's just like, And I love that. If you remember the Five Doctors, which Doctor is it that figures it all out? It's the First Doctor. The First Doctor is, they're like, are you his servants, as he says? Don't believe them! You think he should have immortality? Yes, I do! It's the First Doctor that figures out the riddle. He who loses wins, and he who wins shall lose. It's the First Doctor that figures that out. Keep in mind of that. And so at the end of it, he's the one chuckling. I love that little laugh he does. I just figured it out. He realized, and he says, Rassilon, he realized that eternity wasn't a blessing, it was a curse. or it was a curse, not a blessing. It's the first Doctor who figures that out. Now, we need to get back to on time. Let's go along here. I like how the first Doctor is portrayed in that. And Hurndall seems like he's having a ball. I absolutely love Hurndall in that. There's actually a little bonus clip, too, on the 5 Doctors anniversary set. It was some promotional stuff for the episode where it shows the 5th Doctor and the 1st Doctor. They pull up in like a little cart or a little van or something, and they're being interviewed. And they're both kind of in persona. And the 1st Doctor, Richard Hurndall's selling it just as much as Davison is. Richard Hurndall's not acting like, well, I'm a person standing in because William Hartnell's not here. He's staying like, I'm the 1st Doctor. And they're like, well, who's going to save it? The 1st Doctor's like, I will. And the 5th Doctor's like, I will. They're both like, I will, I will. And then they look at each other, we will. And I love that little bit because Richard Hurndall just seems so invested in the role and like he's having such a ball being there. And just, to me, that's it. The 1st Doctor is the ringleader. Anytime there's a multi-Doctor story, he's the one in charge. He's Batman. He is the one everyone listens to. And that's how he's portrayed in the 3 Doctors and the 5 Doctors. He feels like the one who's the center of the room. The problem and the cardinal sin to me for Twice Upon a Time is that the 2nd Doctor, or the 1st Doctor, excuse me, the 1st Doctor feels like he's playing second fiddle to the 12th Doctor. The 12th Doctor doesn't have that respect and awe for the 1st Doctor that the others do. Now, to be fair, if there is any Doctor out there that's not going to have the 1st Doctor in awe, it will be the 12th Doctor, because the 12th Doctor's a lot like the 1st Doctor. That makes kind of sense. But it's weird because the story, again, it plays the 1st Doctor as the sidekick to the 12th Doctor. And that's not right. That doesn't work for me. The 1st Doctor plays second fiddle to no one. The 1st Doctor is sidekick to no one. It treats the 12th Doctor like he's Batman and the 1st Doctor like he's his plucky sidekick Robin. And that's not the 1st Doctor. That is not the 1st Doctor at all. And I don't like that. I don't like that the 12th Doctor seems like the one in charge and the 1st Doctor's just along for the ride in the little, the little go-kart seat on the bike or whatever. The little side pocket car. That's not the 1st Doctor. The 1st Doctor's the one in charge. He takes command. There's a couple moments, like I like when he points out that the woman's face isn't symmetrical, the glass face. Well, you can see properly. You can tell if that feels like a very 1st Doctor moment, and I like that. But there are other points where, like, the 1st Doctor is looking at the 12th Doctor, and he's like, who the hell do you think you are? That doesn't strike me as something Hartnell would say. I can't imagine him using curse words like hell. I can't grip that. But then right after when he goes, I am the Doctor, that part sounds perfectly like Hartnell. I like that. So we literally have like 2 lines in a row, one of which I'm like, that's not something the 1st Doctor would say. And the second one of which I'm like, that's the 1st Doctor. That's the Hartnell Doctor. Right there next to each other. Even the way he delivers the line when the footage transitions from 10th Planet to Twice. With a love, pride, hate, fear. Have you no emotions, sir? Watch the original version of how Hartnell does that. Have you no emotions, sir? And then watch how Bradley does it. Have you no emotions, sir? They're very different. And I get that Bradley is trying to do kind of his own 1st Doctor and not just imitate Hartnell. I get that. But it's so far removed from Hartnell's 1st Doctor, to me, it doesn't work completely. Especially the more I see of Hartnell, the more this is apparent to me. If you look the way they just deliver that, have you no emotion, sir, and they're very different deliveries. And that's a perfect example of the difference to me between Hartnell's 1st Doctor and Bradley's 1st Doctor. That much of a difference between the portrayals. And I can't escape that. As much as I love Twice Upon a Time, and I like David Bradley as the 1st Doctor, I do. Hurndall, to me, feels more like Hartnell's Doctor. In control, in command. And that's what I look for. And part of that is the writing, but for me, part of that is the performance. When I watch Hurndall acting as the 1st Doctor, he's doing a commanding in performance and taking charge. When I'm watching Bradley, he's the 12th Doctor's plucky sidekick. That's not the 1st Doctor. That is not the 1st Doctor. And that's the worst writing mistake you can make with the 1st Doctor. The 1st Doctor is nobody's sidekick. He's not second fiddle to anybody. He's the one in charge. If you have a multi-Doctor story with the 1st Doctor, he's the boss. That's just how it is. That's how you write it. And I think that's my cardinal issue with Bradley's performance. I think a lot of you cheated. Because I think a lot of you are basing, not just off Twice Upon a Time, but a lot of you are basing your thoughts off of An Adventure in Time and Space. And that's not accurate because he's not playing the First Doctor in Adventure in Time and Space. He's playing William Hartnell, who at parts is playing the First Doctor. And to me, that's different. That's very different. Now, I have an advantage because I've never watched an Adventure in Time and Space. Because I've honestly never wanted to get around to watching it. I've just never really wanted to watch it. I have seen like 3 or 4 clips from it, like the Matt Smith stuff. I've seen that. I've just never sat down and watched it, and I don't need anyone to send it to me. I have it on Blu-ray. It's in the 50th anniversary steelbook. I own it. I just haven't watched it. But because I haven't seen it, I'm not biased toward Bradley, because I know he does a stellar performance as William Hartnell. I've heard that's one of the reasons why I am glad they brought him back in Twice Upon a Time to be the First Doctor, and I do like him in Twice Upon a Time. Let me be clear. But I don't have that bias of him in Adventure in Space of Time clouding my judgment. I'm going strictly off Twice Upon a Time and the 5 Doctors, and I really enjoy just Hurndall more. He just feels more like Hartnell's First Doctor to me. But let's see what some of you say, since most of you did vote for Bradley. Again, Richard Hurndall only had 27% of the vote. David Bradley had 61% of the vote, and 12% said that they don't care for either of them. So let's see what you guys said. Phil Owen said, the Bradley Doctor in Twice Upon a Time was such a cynical piece of character assassination, such an insult to Hartnell's legacy. It was a major factor in my decision to stop watching the show. That's fair. See, I'm not quite that far in that direction, but I think if that's fair. I think there are fans of the First Doctor who feel that way, and apparently it was enough to where Phil was done with the show. Shamrock Particle, one of my regular viewers, says Bradley was closer to Hartnell in mannerisms. I don't agree with that personally, but the scripts he had to deal with weren't of the First Doctor. That's true, and I have mentioned a lot of it is down to the writing. Michael says, anyone who picked Bradley knows nothing about the First Doctor. Again, that's too far in the other direction. And I've seen some of Michael's comments and other stuff. He does very much go far in that direction. He really doesn't like Bradley's First Doctor. I know. Aaron Smith says, I don't like how they exaggerated the sexism of 60s Doctor Who in Twice Upon a Time. It was there, but not the level that was implied in Twice Upon a Time. I agree. I realize that this has nothing to do with the actor, so I can't hold that against David Bradley. I really enjoyed the scene in Twice Upon a Time where William Hartnell, in his speech to the Cyber Leader, changed to David Bradley. That is really well done and a magnificent scene, and I love the way it does the reverse of that for the regeneration. Kenneth Raymond Moore said Stephen Noonan is the best First Doctor. I believe he does him in some of the audios. One of my regulars, Henry Andrews, says, they both did great in my opinion. Both added something new to the character. I see it like this. They're playing a version of the First Doctor rather than a version of William Hartnell portraying the First Doctor. So in terms of that, I feel that David Bradley is the stronger performance, only because we had more of him as the First Doctor than Hurndall. But Hurndall is by no means a bad rendition either. Of course, though, Hartnell did it the best because, after all, he is the original, you might say. Well, apart from this talentless child issue. Alice, who is also one of my patrons, hello Alice, says Richard Hurndall was great, but nowhere near David Bradley's portrayal, especially in the film. That just touched me. And I assume she means An Adventure in Space of Time, which I've addressed. But I have heard he gives a truly wonderful performance as William Hartnell. Bobby says there is only one First Doctor. Fair enough. Ham says, didn't really care for either of them. Not keen on bringing him back with a different actor as it takes me out of the canon completely. It's like when Game of Thrones had Ed Sheeran in the show. Fair enough. Some people don't like to see the Doctors replaced, and I understand that. I mean, the only person I would accept as the third Doctor would be Sean, understandably. Edward says, David Bradley, but only because of Big Finish and Adventure in Time and Space, not Twice Upon a Time, though that story is honestly not as bad if you edit out some of the terrible scenes. And yeah, I should have mentioned, I do know David Bradley has done some Big Finish stuff as the First Doctor, which I've heard is really good. Let's see, Michael also added in that the First Doctor versus sexist caricature. Again, I know Michael tends to go really far end on that pendulum of not liking Bradley's First Doctor, which is his opinion, and he's entitled to it. one of my other regulars, whose name I cannot pronounce, says, I didn't say that I don't love Hartnell, just pointing out that his doddery old geezer, or Hurndall, that his doddery old geezer with quavery voice and whistling teeth is more caricatured than Bradley's more three-dimensional portrayal of the first Doctor. I disagree, actually. I completely disagree with that. We actually had a really long talk about that one in the comments there. To be honest. Even he says there are only about 6 occasions where sexist comments appear in Twice Upon a Time, and it's been blown all out of proportion by the fans. And he says he was disappointed and surprised to me to have succumbed to groupthink, which I didn't. And as I point out in this video, while I think it is a little overly done, that I have a perfectly good reason in my mind why he says those things. Because again, he's just trying to set Mark Gatiss' character at ease. So he's saying things that a person of Mark Gatiss' character's time would think. So he's just saying that to kind of get him calmed and take his mind off things. Bananas Are Good said, over the past few years, I've started to slightly dislike Bradley's performance as the first Doctor. His William Hartnell performance was brilliant, but he didn't bring any of the mannerisms and quirks Hartnell did as the Doctor, and just came off as a confused old fuddy-duddy. I suppose they both did their best, but I voted neither. Can't beat old Bill. And then he quoted, what do you mean, maybe? What do you think it is, a space helmet for a cow? I love that comment from, the Time Meddler, from the Time Meddler. Other things to do while I have you here. I would appreciate if you click that like button, and the subscribe button, and the bell for notifications so you never miss out on another video. I also have a Patreon if you like what I do and would like to support what I do. There is a link to that down in the description below. I do an exclusive video for usually at my $10 tier and higher every week. I also have a P.O. box if there's anything you would like to send me. Again, this was actually sent to me by one of my subscribers, Thomas, which I really appreciate. I'm not actually sure who he is in the comments because I don't know what name he goes under. I don't think he's ever identified himself. But I very much appreciate him sending it, and I'm very glad he enjoys the content. I also have a link to my Amazon wish list as well, and a link to my Amazon UK wish list. My regular Amazon wish list I update pretty regularly. Most importantly though, thank you for watching.